Special meeting of the school board to order at 6:34. Mr. Middlestat has indicated something's come up. He's unable to attend tonight. Mr. Green, would you mind taking roll for us?
Yes, but you have to wait just a smidgen of a moment. My apologies, you caught me mid-snack just before before I took a bite of Doritos. Ms. Birkmeyer.
I am here in Chesterfield Township, Michigan.
All right. Mr. Richards.
I am here, Warren, Michigan.
Ms. Knox.
Here in Chesterfield.
Mr. Drew.
Here, Madison Heights.
Mr. Moses.
I am here. I am en route to New Baltimore. I should be there in about 10, 15 minutes.
All right. Please pay attention to the road. Don't want anything to happen to you while you're traveling.
I'm a passenger. My lovely wife picked me up.
That might be more. I know Mike's wife. I can say that stuff. And I am present as well in New Baltimore. And we'll do one more check for Mr. Middlestat.
Mr. Middlestat indicated that something's come up. He won't be able to attend tonight.
All right, very good. You have a quorum.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Silveri. So tonight's agenda does look a little bit different than our normal with, community input and such, but I want to assure everybody that as Mr. Silveri probably will further in the meeting, that we will have opportunities for stakeholder input, whether that be staff or community members. So not to worry, tonight is not the only opportunity that people have to give input on our superintendent selection process. I have received a few questions about that. And as we'll get into in the meeting, there will be a timeline and that will be addressed a little bit more. And then I'm going to just hand it over to Mr. Silveri, and he's going to walk us through tonight's agenda.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I do think I will be, hopefully, as we go through this meeting this evening, which I'll tell you now, it could take up to 3 hours. We won't exceed that. We'll end no later than 9:30. Very likely we're going to be able to wrap it up before that, but we will not go past 9:30. During the course of that time, we're going to cover a lot of information. The goal is to make sure that you are very well informed when you get to the end of this meeting, that you understand what this search is going to look like, feel like, what your responsibilities are, mine, from beginning to end. So there shouldn't be any confusion, and I invite you to ask any and all questions you may have throughout the evening so that there are no questions. But I think any questions that community members, staff members may have probably will be answered through the course of the evening too. And I will address how we're going to involve stakeholders as well. So I want to start then going to the agenda for the evening with introductions. So let me back up and thank you for selecting Michigan Leadership Institute. Really looking forward to working with you and helping guide you through this process, which I'm optimistic will have a successful end. But since we'll be working pretty closely together over the course of the next several months, I'd like to start out this first planning meeting just with some very brief introductions. And so I'll take the lead and start. You had received some biographical information on me, but just to kind of reiterate briefly, I'm a longtime educator. I was a teacher, counselor, principal, HR director, assistant superintendent, and superintendent in 2 districts, Marysville Schools, not too far from you, and Waterford School District in Oakland County. I've been working with the Michigan Leadership Institute since I retired from Waterford in 2015. done numerous superintendent searches in just about any kind of district you can imagine. Also have worked with districts on strategic planning, board governance, leadership development, grade level reconfiguration, a whole lot of other issues too. So not only did my career include a lot of experience in public education, but my post-retirement career has as well. And briefly, I'll tell you that I am married, have been for many years, 36 years, to my lovely wife, Lois. We live in Rochester. We have 2 adult children. My son is career Navy. He's a chief petty officer in the Navy, stationed in Virginia. My daughter is the medical facility director at the Michigan Humane Society in Detroit. We've got 3 beautiful grandkids, 2 cats and a dog. That about sums it up for me. So Lisa, I don't know if you want to just call on folks or we want to leave it to everyone just to volunteer.
We generally, people have no trouble usually speaking up if they have questions, and we do pretty well doing that.
All right. All right. So just anyone who would like to, please jump in with a brief introduction.
I'll go first. So I'm the board president, and my name's Lisa, and I have been a resident of Anchor Bay since 2009. I work in home health care at the moment, and I do some teaching as well at U of M Flint. And I've been on the board. I was just reelected to the board. I've been here for 2 years, reelected for another 6-year term.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Name is Patrick Green. I've been on the board for about 2 years, Anchor Bay resident for 18. I have a son who is a senior at Anchor Bay, graduating this year, and I have a daughter who is a senior at Michigan, who also graduated from Anchor Bay. It's about all the exciting highlights.
Thank you.
All right. John DeRue, I'm on the board for 2 years, roughly. Grew up in the Anchor Bay area, went to Anchor Bay, left after college, moved over to Sterling Heights for a little bit, then moved back here in 2014. I'm a financial secretary for a plumbers union, Plumbers Local 98. And I got 3 daughters in the district, in each school, 1 in elementary, 1 in middle school, 1 in high school. And that's about it, right?
Good. Thank you, John.
Hi, Mr. Silveri. I'm Jill Knox. I was newly elected to the board and started 48 days ago. I've lived in the district for 19 years. I have 2 sons in the district. One is in 11th grade, one is in 12th grade. I'm a real estate agent. Prior to that, I have 16 years of federal grant writing experience at Wayne State. That's what I did there, and that's really about it.
Hey, John, I'm Dennis Richards. Grew up outside of Boston. I've been in Michigan for about 8 years here in the Anchor Bay School District. I'm a vice president of operations of a company called Incident Clear. We have contracts with the Michigan Department of Transportation, Colorado Department of Transportation, West Virginia Department of Transportation. I was newly elected to the board to a 6-year term. I have 3 boys. I have a 27 graduate from Anchor Bay who's now in the Marines. I have a junior also, like Jill, at Anchor Bay High School, and I have a 6th grader over at South, and I look forward to working with you.
Okay, and I'm gonna throw it over to Mike because I know he's on the phone, so I'll let him know that. Take it away, Mike.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, John. My name's Mike Moses. I'm a board trustee. I've been on the board for about 2 years now. I graduated from Anchor Bay. I have 4 kids in the district, 1 in high school, 2 that are in 8th grade, but will be going into high school next year, and then 1 in elementary. And all my nieces and nephews went to Anchor Bay. We've been in this area my whole life. So I like nothing more than to put this school on the top.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Nice to see we have some things in common. Lisa, my wife, works in home health care. And John, my father, was the secretary for a local union at the old Fleetwood Auto Factory on Springwells. And Dennis, we both have a son in the military, so we do share some things in common. And we're all going to be on this adventure together now to go forward and work hard to find the right person to be your next superintendent. So jumping back to the agenda, item 2, to establish the points of contact and mode of communication. I'll tell you what we typically do is normally the 2 key people that I stay in contact with are the board president, and typically it's the administrative assistant to the board and the superintendent. Rely on the administrative assistant just to help with some logistics and to share messages. And with the board president, that's my direct contact. And then when there are questions, concerns, whatever it might be, board members would contact the board president, who would communicate through me. Now I'm telling you that's what we typically do. Of course, it doesn't have to be exactly like that, but let me float that out there first and see if you would be comfortable with that. Not hearing any dissenting voices, so I'm assuming that's a yes.
John, is it typical to have the superintendent involved, even though the superintendent is possibly on their way out and is the one that we're replacing?
It's actually atypical. I wouldn't say it never happens, but it's pretty rare. But here's where this will be the first time I tell you this, probably not the last time. You've hired me because we have a process in place. You're asking the question. I appreciate it. I'm happy to, I'll answer honestly, and I'll tell you how we normally do things, etc. But you hired me to work for you, right? This is your process. This is your search, and you're hiring your superintendent. So everything doesn't have to be exactly by the book, so to speak. If you felt for whatever reason it was important to have your superintendent's voice involved, you could do that. Normally, though, the superintendent kind of takes a back seat, is kind of there behind the scenes for support and assistance if it's needed, but doesn't become directly involved in the process.
Maybe I was distracted. I thought you had mentioned that the superintendent would be involved in the process. I apologize.
That's okay. No worries. No, I'm glad you asked the question. Okay, so who is that second person then? Is there the administrative assistant that I would be communicating with, and who would that be?
That would be our board secretary. That would be Miss DeCristofaro, Sherry. She's also on this call as well, taking notes usually.
Okay, hi Sherry. All right, I appreciate that. And I do want to encourage any time along the way, you should never feel like you're at a loss as to what's going on or being kept in the dark. So please don't hesitate to ask questions, seek clarification, whatever it might be. So item 3, and this is the by far the largest part of the agenda, the thing we'll spend easily the most time on, is to review the timeline and the search activities. Starting tomorrow, an official posting that we'll put out there. I will tell you that we have already just this week posted the vacancy on the Michigan Leadership Institute website, Michigan Association of School Administrators website. It's application is live on Frontline. It's good just to get the word out there. Some people I'm sure knew about it already, but others, this could well spark some early interest. In fact, no sooner did we post it, and I think within the hour I'd gotten a phone call asking about it. So know that that's out there already, but this will create kind of the official position announcement where we provide all the detail that potential applicants will need in order, A, to determine if it's something they want to apply to, are they going to be a good fit potentially? And then B, it gives them all the detail they need to go ahead and apply. The reason when we talk about collecting feedback to develop a candidate profile, the candidate profile describes the skills, qualities, and characteristics that the ideal candidate for Anchor Bay would possess. So what we typically do under normal circumstances where we're not doing everything virtually is I would come into the district and meet face to face with various stakeholder groups of your choosing. Normally that includes administrators, staff members, parents, community members, sometimes high school students, sometimes more specific groups like labor leaders, like city officials, whatever the case might be, whatever you had decided was important. Under current conditions where we're really not able to do that, we've been really relying heavily on an online survey. So we would provide a link. In fact, we've already created the link, which I'll go ahead and forward after this meeting, which you would simply need to make available to all of your stakeholders. And it asks two basic questions. One that I already shared with you. What are the skills, qualities, and characteristics you're looking for in the next superintendent of Anchor-based school district? And what are the top 5 roughly strengths of your district, the things that you're most proud of and that really stand out when you think about Anchor-based schools? The candidate profile we rely on pretty heavily. Not only is it part of the posting, so it helps candidates know if they may be a good fit, but then as you go through the process of selecting who you want to interview and who ultimately you select, it's important that we keep that candidate profile front and center, and that all along the way, you're very mindful of the fact that we're looking for somebody who's best fit, who most closely fits that profile. So that's a really critical part of this process. The district and community profile, honestly, is really strictly for that position announcement, and it really is more to help attract potential candidates than anything. Again, I have a link that's ready to go, and I'll be forwarding that, I guess, likely to Sherry at the end of this meeting. And what districts typically will do is they'll post it on their district website, of course, but then any other way that you may have to get the word out to people that they can log on to this link. It's very brief, won't take them much time, but it's a way for them to have a voice in this process. Quite often districts will use any social media sites that they may use to communicate with their stakeholders. If there's you can do so through email if you have email groups created, or listservs. If you have something like a Blackboard Connect where you can reach out and connect with people and get the word out. Totally up to you folks, but I'll provide that tomorrow. And then normally we leave that up for about a week. So if we get that out tomorrow, we would have it up for 1 week. And where would that put us? That would put us at the following Thursday, which would be, looking at my calendar, 25th. So I would take all this feedback, and what I'm looking to do is look for common threads. So in total, I may get, gosh, it really varies depending on the number of participants, but suppose I get 200 different examples of skills, qualities, and characteristics that people are looking for. But what I'm going to be pulling from that are the top maybe 10 to 15 that are shared most frequently, and that's what's going to go ahead and make up the candidate profile. Sometimes what shows up in that are things that people may look at as being just very basic, kind of no-brainers, like great communication skills, for example. But it's what it tells candidates, who will often ask too, what is the board looking for? And I steer them back to that. It really tells prospective candidates what stakeholders in the district most value and what they most prioritize when it comes to what you're looking for. So even though every district might be looking for somebody who's a great communicator, if that's something that stands out with your district, it tells candidates that's really critical to you folks in Anchor Bay. So later in the meeting, I'm going to be asking you the same questions. It's important I get that same feedback from you, but then I'll be collecting anything and everything that I might get from that online survey, putting it all together, pulling those common threads, and creating a candidate profile. And that district and community profile that will be in the position announcement, along with some other details that we'll get to in a little bit too. So with closing that survey in a week, by the following day, which would now be Friday, the 26th, I would have a draft of that position announcement that I would send out to you. And I would be looking to get your feedback over the course of Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You would provide any feedback you may have to Lisa, would put it together. She would get to me by Monday morning, the 1st. Let me know if there's any suggested changes. I would make those changes, and then we'll go ahead, and on the 1st, we would get that posting out for everyone to see. So one of the things I ask you to look for when you're reviewing that posting too is not only is it inclusive enough, does it hit the right notes, but even just simply for accuracy. If I include something, for example, in the district profile based on feedback, and you feel like maybe that's not quite accurate or doesn't quite say it like it needs to, you can suggest that change. I'll make those revisions, and then we'll have the final version ready to go out and be ready to start collecting applications for the position. So that all happens within a fairly tight window of time, about a week and a half. And again, we would start that immediately tomorrow with that survey link ready to go out. So I want to take a breath and see if you have any questions about that at all. That makes sense? No questions? All right, very good. So we would then have that posting out and the be accepting applications. Again, even though people can technically start filling out applications even now that the application is live, but formally the window for posting would be for applying rather would be from March 1st through April 2nd. I have the wrong date on there that I'll update. It says within that Friday, April 9th, it should say Friday, April 2nd. I'll be updating this anyway after this meeting, and so I'll correct that for you as well. So the application window would close on Friday, April 2nd at 4 o'clock. What I'll be doing during that time, well, let me back up. What you'll be doing during that time is probably agonizing, wondering what the heck's going on, because I don't share who's applying with you during that time. Candidates have an expectation of confidentiality. So I can't share the applications with you along the way, and don't. So it's a really quiet period of time for boards, and it can, it's a little bit awkward, maybe even. Your curiosity may be getting the best of you, but I'll be very busy during that time. I'm monitoring applications as they're coming in very closely. I'm reaching out to candidates with any questions I may have about their applications. Part of reaching out to before I bring the applicants to you, make sure that they're serious about it, that if they're invited to interview, that they'll accept the invitation. And just to learn as much about these folks as possible. I don't do formal reference checks during this time, again, due to confidentiality reasons, but I am vetting them in about any way that I can, just by virtue of what I do for Michigan Leadership Institute and what we do as an organization. I will, and we will very likely know a lot of the applicants already, know of them already. Those we don't, through the network of connections that we have, it gives us an opportunity discreetly to reach out and learn some additional things about them. And frankly, I'm doing even the most simple thing, like doing internet searches on each of them just to see what that may turn up. Obviously, if there's something out there that could be of concern, we'd want to know that sooner than later. So I will be working all during that time to stay on top of the applications, make connections, do some vetting, all in preparation for when we come back together then the following week. And what I've designated, and I'm hoping this date does work for you, is Tuesday, April 6th. And I'll just be totally transparent. I'm working with other districts on a couple of different things, including searches. And so I've got a couple of other things going the week of April 5th, but the day that week that would be ideal for me would be Tuesday, April 6th. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but if that works for you, what I'll do is we'll come together. You'll start in an open meeting briefly, but you'll immediately go into closed session. This is the only time in the entire process that you can do anything out of the public eye per the Open Meetings Act. So, and again, this is due to an expectation of confidentiality on the part of the applicants. But at that time, I'll share every single applicant with you. I'll have a spreadsheet ready for you that I will share with you that will show every applicant by name. It will show their entire work history. It will show the degrees that they hold. And I'll group them through that into 3 different groupings. The A group, so to speak, will be the group that most closely fits your candidate profile and has the greatest amount of relevant experience in terms of the superintendency. The B group will be people who at least meet the basic qualifications and may well have some other experience that you could find attractive too. Maybe it's not quite up to the level of those in the A group, but they still may be very viable candidates. And then the C group would be those that either just simply do not meet the basic applications, and that does happen for whatever reason. Sometimes people will apply that really aren't qualified for it. Or if there may be red flags that I would think may give you pause that I would be sharing with you at that time as well. So I do that only because you're digesting a lot of information in a short period of time. Before that night's over, you're going to be making decisions about who it is that you want to invite in for first round interviews. So the purpose of grouping them like that is just to try to expedite the process for you. But I want to emphasize now, and I'll do it again at that time, in no way, shape, or form is it intended to select the people that you're going to interview for you. That's totally up to you. And frankly, you can pick anybody from group A, B, or C. That is totally your call. I actually had the experience in one district. They not only decided there was somebody from that C group that they wanted to interview, but that person made it to the final round, and ultimately that person was selected as the district's next superintendent. So again, that's totally your call, but I do that just to help the process along. So in that closed session, I'm sharing all that information with you. I'll have the application materials for all of those candidates as well. I'll have their full frontline applications, I'll have their resumes, and I'll have their cover letters. So that will all be available to you to review. We can't do any type of deliberation in closed session per the Open Meetings Act, so you can't make any decisions. You can't kind of commiserate with one another. Well, what do you think about this person? You can't do any of that. It's only informational. So I'll share what information I have and what I've been able to learn about these folks. You can ask any questions that you may have about the candidates just to learn more about them. But we can't get into decision-making mode in any way, shape, or form. And if it happens sometimes that a board member kind of innocently will start to go there, frankly, I'll stop you. Part of my job is to keep you out of trouble. I will do that. So it can take quite a bit of time. Normally we schedule about 3 hours for that meeting, and that behind the scenes discussion takes up the biggest part of that meeting. So we would come out of closed session, go into open session. In an open session, I'll go around to each of you and simply ask you, having reviewed all applicants, who are those that you would like to invite into interview? Districts almost always will invite anywhere from 4 to 6 people to participate in first round interviews. The question is sometimes, does it have to be at least 4, or does it have to be limited to 6? The answer is no to both questions, but I'm telling you just from experience, virtually always it's minimum of 4, maximum of 6. So however many it is that you had identified as those that you would like to interview, but one by one individually, I would ask you just publicly to say, here are the candidates I would like to invite in to participate in first round interviews. We don't do that by name yet, again, because you may name somebody who's not going to be selected. And if people aren't selected, we keep their names confidential. So I'll have a letter designation for each candidate, and I'll be asking you then to share the people that you want to interview by letter. So for example, if you have 26 applicants, they'll be lettered A to Z. Somebody might say, I'd like to interview candidates A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. So we would give each of the 7 of you the opportunity to do that. What normally happens is that a clear consensus emerges where there's at least 4 board members who are of like mind and have identified the same people that they would like to interview. And so once that happens and a consensus emerges, somebody would make a motion to invite those individuals into interview. It would be seconded. There could be any additional discussion. Once that motion was successfully passed, I would go ahead and read aloud for anybody from the public who's listening the names of the people that you selected and their current position. I will also then, at the end of that meeting, if hopefully we're meeting face to face, you're free to go by the end of that meeting. I'm going to stick around, get on the phone and call those people immediately. A, to make sure they know that their confidentiality is no longer in play. And B, to get them specifically scheduled on to the interview schedule. And then once that's filled out, I'll forward that to Sherry, and she can then share that with you, post it on your district website, anywhere else you would like to, and we're off and running. So there's a little bit more business to take care of, even after you've selected the people you want to interview, though, before we stop and I make those calls. Part of that is to select interview questions for first round. I'll have a bank of interview questions that you can choose from, and they're numbered in a way that we can discuss them publicly without reading the questions aloud, which of course we don't want to do. But we'll tentatively select the interview questions for the first round and identify who's going to ask them. But then in the intervening time, before we come back for the interviews, if anybody would like to suggest a more personalized question, maybe I would say more personalized towards Anchor Bay, or just something that gets to an issue that our questions don't cover. Again, you could submit those to President Birkmeyer. She can end up putting those together, getting with me, and we can make those adjustments if need be. So we provide the questions to help you, but if there are burning questions that you think you may need to ask, you're going to have the chance to give that input, and we'll have the opportunity to include those in those first round interview questions. So you should walk out of that meeting knowing who all the applicants were, having selected those that you are going to interview in the first round, and having selected the interview questions for first round interviews. And so you're going to be pretty armed and ready to get the ball rolling after that. All right, time for me to take another breath. I talk a lot during this meeting. I apologize, but
John, can I just ask a quick question?
yes, please.
The Tuesday, April 6th date, I believe that's our spring break. I'm okay with the date, but I just want to make sure that everyone
Okay.
on the board knows. I don't know if anyone has plans. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there too, just so everyone, everyone knows too. So
I appreciate that. That could be an issue. And look, I don't want you to be shy. That is part of what we want to accomplish tonight, is wherever we need to make adjustments, we'll make them. So would that be problematic for anybody?
It may be for me. I have no idea what we're doing at this point because our trip was canceled. So we may be out, but if I could connect virtually, if I'm not around, then it's not a problem. I don't foresee being somewhere where I can't connect. But then again, I don't really know. So.
All right. I will say that even if we are able to physically meet at that time, I've obviously done this. I've had to hold this meeting virtually before too. So I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. And we can certainly provide you with the information you'll need to have access to by email, so that you can see everything else that your colleagues are seeing.
Would it be a big, because I might be out that week as well. Does it affect anything? I see there's nothing again until April 19th. I mean, to do it the following week, I mean, it's not going to throw anything off schedule, right? And just leave the week of the spring break alone.
The only issue with the following week, but let's see if we can work it out, is I'm going to be conducting first round interviews in another district. So I'm going to be personally tied up from that Monday through Thursday. Now, for example, though, if you were willing, I certainly am, we could hold that meeting on that Friday, which would be what, the 15th?
16th?
Is that the 16th? Let me look. You might be right.
Yeah, it's the 16th.
16th. Okay.
I will be out of town for the first 2/3 of that week as well. April 6th. I would be able to meet virtually if we had to do that, where I'll be, but I know I won't be here.
Does anybody have a problem with April 16th on the board?
I think the 16th works great for me.
I mean, if we meet on Friday and Mr. Silvelleri's good with it, I would say we meet on if everybody's good with it, the 16th And then that way, if we're able to meet in person, that gives us another week where that might even be possible. And then we're all there and our full attention is on what we need to do.
I agree, John.
Sure.
I would agree, John, Jill, definitely. Spring break, I'm not going to jump onto a call if we can go a little later.
I'm
Sorry.
Right.
I'm totally on board with that. I think that makes perfect sense. So I'm glad you raised that. And so I'm going to we'll look at that date as being established for Friday, April 16th. Again, maybe it does make it that much more likely that we're going to be able to meet face to face too. I would hope so. I'll be in touch, by the way, again, with anybody who I think has a ghost of a chance to be selected to interview. I'll be in touch with just prior to our meeting. And again, just to make sure they know that, or to ask the question, if you get a call from me, will you accept the invitation? And to let them know specifically that because it could be a short turnaround for them, but I would then let them know that to be kind of keep your phone handy on the 16th. If you're selected, I'll be calling that night. And then the interviews will start the following week as soon as that Monday. And so, again, it could be a quick turnaround, but they'll be forewarned. And so it won't come as a big surprise, and it should not be a problem for the candidates. My experience is that people who are going to be eager to be your next superintendent will be as accommodating as they need to be to help make that happen. So that should not be a problem. So what I'd likely do then, by the way, too, is because it certainly can't hurt, I may well extend by at least a few days the application deadline. We might as well give people just a little bit more time to see the application and apply. It'll give me a little bit more time to dive in and recruit if need be. And I didn't mention that, by the way, I failed to. It's a good time to kind of go back. During that period of time where, again, it's quiet for you, not so much for me, I'm watching the applications, and I also am considering the strength of the field. And if there are people out there who I think could be viable candidates and I don't see them naturally applying, I'll be reaching out to them and encouraging them to consider it. I'll send them the posting, encourage them to look it over and consider it, answer their questions. And that can really help at times. I've had at least a couple of experiences in searches where it was one of the people I reached out to who would not have otherwise applied, who ended up becoming the superintendent. So that's a really important part of this. I'll tell you, well, I'll jump into that in a minute. So, okay, so we're looking at the 16th, Friday the 16th, where we'll come together. We'll have that meeting. I'll share all of those applicants with you. And then we're going to look at what time would you like to hold that meeting? What works best for you?
Typically, our meetings start at 7 o'clock. I know we called this one a little earlier. I don't know if that's problematic for people, especially on a Friday. To me, it doesn't matter. So I guess I'll let everybody else weigh in if 6:30 is kind of too tough for some people, or.
I'm flexible, whatever is going to work for everyone else.
Does anybody have a problem getting together a little bit earlier on a Friday, especially if it's going to be a long meeting?
Well, that was going to be my question, John. How long do you think you're going to need for that meeting on the 16th?
Again, I kind of prep boards to be prepared to meet for up to 3 hours for that meeting. And again, bearing in mind what we're doing in closed session, especially, we're reviewing a lot of information and you've got some big decisions to make. Doesn't always take 3, but it could well. So I think you should prep for that and know that it could take that long.
As far as moving the meeting up earlier, the earliest I could do is 5:30.
Anybody good? Is everybody else good with 5:30?
It totally works for me.
Good.
Yeah, I think so.
5:30. Yes.
5:30 on the 16th?
5:30 on the 16th. I will, by the way, just so you know, it's fine if you want to take notes for yourselves for right now, but by tomorrow, we'll have this timeline updated with all of these specific dates and times plugged in, and I'll send that to Sherry to forward to you. So just know that I'll be providing that to you as well. So, but yeah, so now we're talking about Friday the 16th, 5:30, and again, plan on up to a 3-hour meeting that evening. So now we're coming back together the week of April 19th to conduct first round interviews. Our first round interviews, we schedule 90 minutes per interview. Candidates don't always take 90, but based on the number of questions we ask and based on experience, 90 is about right, and we want to give them an opportunity to go that long. There are some introductory remarks from the board president. Go through a question and answer session. Typically, you provide questions or opportunity for the candidate to ask questions of the board and to make any closing comments. And so we provide 90 for that. And you know, so I've had candidates finish in as early as 55 minutes. I've had people who we've had to prod to pick up the pace to finish within 90. But because of that, and given that you'll likely want to schedule, what typically we do is put 10 minutes in between, just a quick break. So now you're looking at a total, even with just 2 interviews, of 3 hours and 10 minutes. I discourage boards from trying to do more than that, because you try to tack on even one more interview and it's a long night. And by the time you get to the third one, it's just tough to be as attentive and engaged as you want to be. So given that, though, I'll go back to what I had said before. Normally, you're going to pick 4 to 6 people for this. Given that you could be picking up to 6, very likely, what we'd want to do now is pick 3 nights for the first 3 nights of interviews. And then you're going to have a choice to make in terms of decision, because after you've conducted all of those first round interviews, I take you through a process of deliberation to narrow the field down to what I would hope would be 2 finalists. But again, does it have to be 2? No. Normally it is, and I think that's ideal. So I'll have you go through a process of doing that. I've had boards on occasion, just after the very last interview on the last night, take a break, come back together, and then go ahead through and deliberate to narrow the field down. More often than not, boards would rather walk away from it and come back the next night, and because that'll give them a chance to really think things over and come back prepared to go through it. Another reason that can be, I would think, advisable, if you can make it work, would be that this is another opportunity for engagement of your stakeholders. The first one is through this survey link that we're going to be providing as soon as tomorrow. But hopefully, again, we'll be doing these interviews face to face. Anybody who's present for the interviews, which are public, and we hope that your stakeholders, many of them, show up for this. Anybody who's there, I'll have a feedback form available that we'll provide to them, and we'll ask them to provide written feedback. I'll collect that at the end of each interview, hand that over to Sherry. She'll make copies, and before you leave each evening, she'll put copies of each feedback form in the hands of each of the board members. So you'll walk out with those and have a chance to look them over. So when you think about the last night of interviews, it's a lot to ask that you finish the last interview. We take a break to copy feedback forms. You get those, you have to go through and read those and think about who you might want to narrow the field down to, versus we take the time to copy them, we put them in your hands, you walk away and come back the next night. So you will have had adequate opportunity to read through all of those and consider the feedback you get, which of course you want to do. We ask for it for a reason. It's your decision to make as the elected representatives of the community. And yet it's important to know how your staff members, parents, community members are reacting to what they're hearing. The feedback we ask for is to share what they hear that they're impressed by, what they hear that may give them pause, and even to include, after hearing this interview, are there some outstanding questions that you might like to see addressed? And sometimes those questions can form the basis of second round questions for you. So that's a mouthful. Now I'll tell you again, for that week, I am unavailable due to a commitment in another district on that Monday, the 19th. So if we were to schedule 3 nights for interviews and then a 4th night for deliberation, for me to be present, it would have to be that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for the interviews, and Friday to come back and deliberate. If you were to end up, for example, only selecting 4 candidates to interview, we would simply shorten that. We would use the first 3 nights and would use Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we'd be able to skip Friday, but that remains to be seen. We won't know that until we come back together on the 16th. I'll tell you now, if that's problematic for you, I'm part of an organization. If I needed to have a colleague come in, if you needed to start the interviews on that Monday, I'm there for all the interviews. I don't play a terribly active role. I'm there just to make sure all is going well. I greet the candidates as they come in. I kind of prompt you if things are running slow and you might need to pick up the pace with the interview. But it wouldn't be a problem if that was a necessity, just so you know that. So let me start with that and ask, would it be possible for you to schedule in that week? Then it would be what, the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for interviews, and then that Friday to come back and deliberate. The deliberation meeting typically is fairly quick. Just so you know, normally that does not take a terribly long time.
I know, just for myself, that's fine personally. Generally, I want to say that when our committees try to meet, Mondays are a tough day for a lot of people to try to get together anyway. But I'll let everybody else kind of weigh in. I don't know if anybody has any pressing issues for those dates.
Those dates work for me.
I have nothing on my calendar right now, so.
Yep, me too. Calendar's clean right now.
All right.
I'm good with them.
All right. And that's part of the reason we take the trouble to get these specific dates and times set now. So before your calendars fill up, we get them in your calendars and we save them. And again, we may be overshooting a little bit. We may not need 4 nights. But in the event that we do, you'll have them in your calendar and you'll be prepared and available. It is going to be really critical, by the way, if I hadn't said this already, that to as great an extent as possible, all 7 of you are present for all of these steps. It's such a huge decision that really important that everybody be there if at all possible. All right.
What are you thinking about on those times? Because we had talked about starting the other one at 5:30. Did we still want to do that, or did we want to go a little bit later, all 3 or 2 or 3 days?
So for the interview nights, remember that you're looking at a grand total of about 3 hours and 10 minutes.
Right.
So I'll take my cue from you. I can start whenever it works for you.
I'm fine as well with whatever time. I just didn't know if we wanted to stick with 5:30 or if we wanted to do 6:30. I don't know what's going to work best for everyone else.
I know I do a ton of interviews here for candidates through our training center, and the later it gets into the night, the worse you are at really looking at a person. So the earlier the better, I would say, if if the board is good with a 5:30 start, if Mike can make that work,
Yeah, as long as it's not before 5:30, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as the rest of the board members, but I just know that as it gets later, your mind starts to lose it.
Right.
Speak for yourself, John.
All right.
So I will say this too. So it sounds like I don't hear anybody objecting. So we can go for 5:30 on each of those nights as well, 5:30 start time. Of course, I'll be updating this, providing it to you. But if we realize afterward that something has come up or there's something that somebody failed to consider and we have to go back and make a revision, I mean, of course we can do that. Just know that. But to whatever extent possible, once we set this, if we can kind of carve it in stone, we're going to be far better off. It's really tough to get 7 people, together with regularity. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to muddy the water any, but doesn't Steve have a hard time getting here at 7 sometimes? Let alone moving it to 5:30, and he's not here to.
Well, and I think, we don't know if it'll be extended, but right now we're required to meet virtually. We may be in person, which that takes another, that brings in another element that we can't just flip on our computer wherever we are. So to consider that too.
From your experience with Steve, what do you have a sense of when the earliest time is that he can start in an in-person meeting?
I'm just going by recollection. There were times he couldn't make it at 7. He would show up at what, 7:15, 7:20, a little late because he was coming from, I think, over on the west side there somewhere. I wish he was on this meeting.
Yeah, well, it would be helpful, but I will say this, the most critical thing is that we get the dates right tonight. If all we have to do is just adjust the time later, it's not a big deal. So we'll go ahead and run with the 5:30 time, but then if Steve weighs in and says, nope, I can't do that, we'll adjust it as need be, but we'll still be able to go ahead and stick to this timeline.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so just real quickly too, for that last evening when you're deliberating, and again, I want you to walk out of this meeting with a pretty clear picture of what to expect. So when you leave the last night of interviews, what you'll have in hand to be able to consider as you're thinking about who do we want to narrow this down to, is you're going to have the candidate applications, resumes, cover letters. Candidates almost always will bring in to the first round interviews additional materials for you to consider. They may have letters of reference. They may have a 90-day plan of entry. They may even provide a hardcover portfolio and a link to an electronic portfolio, you name it. So you'll have that again to kind of go back and check. When you show up the first night of interviews, I'm going to be giving you a binder that has a fresh set of interview questions for each of the candidates that you're interviewing, even though the questions are exactly the same. You're asking them in the same order, same person asking, but I'm going to leave lots of space for notes for each of the candidates. So I encourage you to, as you're deliberating, go back and review your own notes just to refresh your memory. And you're going to have the feedback forms that you will have gotten from the stakeholders that come to the interviews and are providing that. So there's a lot for you to consider during that time at the end of the last interview and before you come back together that final night, as of now, that Friday. And so as you come back together, I'll go around again, and one by one, I'll simply ask each of you to identify which of the candidates you would like to bring back as finalists. I'll ask you to speak to why, but I'll tell you now too, and I'll remind you later, that it's important that you're only speaking as to why, in a positive sense, you want somebody to come back. We're not going to go down the path of why you don't want somebody, or why maybe you weren't impressed with somebody. These people are sticking their necks out to, kind of take the risk of applying to leave their current districts to come to you. And we want to be as considerate to them as possible. So each of you would have the chance to say, okay, I want a candidate, A and B. You want it to say by letter then, but for these reasons, this is why I think these are the best people to invite back. And again, what typically happens is when all 7 of you have had that opportunity, a consensus emerges. Again, it takes a motion, a second, you take a vote. You would now identify the candidates to bring back as finalists. If you don't reach a quick consensus, I'll be able to work you through that. I've done it before. So you'll end that week having identified the 2 people who you'd like to bring back as finalists. So now that gets us to the week of April. I think that's the week of April 24th. Now, again, I've picked 2 specific days, and I think this is a Wednesday and a Thursday, or is this Monday and Tuesday? I'll go back. I don't know if somebody has their calendar up real quick.
It's a Monday, Tuesday, the 26th and 27th.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm thinking that I have, I'll be tied up with another district on that Thursday and Friday. So ideally, you would be able to come back on the 26th and 7th. And we'll go back to those dates in a minute. If those don't work, we'll work it out. But to have an idea of what to expect, you would come back, and typically I would invite you to start those interviews later, like at about 7 o'clock. You're only going to need about an hour to an hour and a half for those follow-up interviews, and you do them on separate nights. So if you have 2 finalists, 2 separate nights. The interviews themselves, the questions normally take up to an hour. One thing we'll talk about later as it gets closer to is, might you want to include a writing prompt? Might you want to include a bit of a presentation as part of that? And depending on the answers to those questions, it could be extended a little bit longer. So it wouldn't be any longer than 90 minutes, but it could be as short as 60. But So that's all you're doing with the candidates that week, is you come 2 separate nights and conduct an hour to an hour and a half second interview with each of the finalists. We will have identified new questions, which again could in part be taken from the feedback you get from stakeholders. In this case, by the way, we want to have, I'd say the majority of the questions be the same for each of the candidates, but it's okay to individualize a bit if there are specific questions you may want to ask of an individual. So, but what happens with the candidates is they're spending the whole day in your district. I shouldn't say whole day, but a good chunk of the day. We have them coming back typically around noon or so on the day that they interview. So on that first day, the first candidate you're going to interview, that person would come in at about noon. We would invite groups of stakeholders in to meet the finalist and to be able to ask questions and interact with him or her. And then at the end of each of those sessions, I'll be even a little bit more aggressively. It's not even so much an invitation, but I'll really be encouraging participants to provide written feedback. I'll collect those at the end of that session. We'll get those copied, and that night that you're conducting the interview, by the time you leave, we'll have copies made of those feedback forms to put in your hand too. You'll help pick the groups that you'd like us to meet with. And again, it could be administrators, staff members, parents, community members, groups of your choice. So the candidate starting about noon is going to meet for, anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour with various groups of stakeholders, answering their questions. We slide a break in between. So if you would start your interviews at about 7, we'd probably end those sessions at about 5:30, give that person a chance to take a dinner break and clear his or her head, and then come back ready to answer additional questions from you at 7 o'clock. So I will be there that whole time too. I'll be there with the finalists to facilitate those meetings with your stakeholders. I offer to take the candidate out to dinner somewhere locally if they're interested, or I invite them to go off and be alone with their thoughts if that's better for them. And I'm there with you then those evenings for the interviews as well. So do you have any questions about kind of what that looks like and how that all works? Okay, hearing none. Again, so for me, the 2 nights that week that work are that Monday and Tuesday, the 26th and 27th. I'm hoping those work for you too, but if not, let's talk about it.
No, those are okay for me. And you said generally those ones are a little bit later. So, that is probably better for getting everybody into a consensus on the time. Not as big of a deal, but I don't know if anybody else has conflicts.
Nope, that works for me.
That works.
All right, not hearing any objections. So we'll roll with the 26th and 27th. If by some odd chance you end up identifying 3 people that you want to bring back, again, we really aim 2 is ideal. We'll have to go back to the drawing board and we'll figure it out. We'll work it out, but chances are it's going to be likely 2, and so we'll be able to take care of that on the 26th and 7th. All right, so that takes us to the following week, now the week of May 3rd. We talked about this, I believe, when you interviewed search firms briefly, but we recommend strongly site visits. And this involves a subcommittee of the board, no more than 3 of you, who would go to the work site of each of the finalists. Normally, you do this on separate days, about a 4-hour block of time. We're not going to establish dates and times now because you don't even know which 3 it would be. You've got time to decide that. But as it gets closer, once you've decided which 3 board members can commit to this, I'll just give you the opportunity to tell me which days of the week work best for you and which 4-hour blocks of time on those days. And then I'll communicate with the finalists and they'll make it work. It hasn't been a problem in the past. I'm sure it won't now. We recommend that it's the same 3 board members that do both. So it's a big commitment, but for consistency's sake, we find that it's better. I send an email message to the candidates and give them guidance as to how to structure this. And normally it's comprised of them getting groups of their own stakeholders together to come together, on a given schedule, to sit down and meet with the board members, and then members of the board can ask any questions that you would like to. I provide you with some basic starter questions just to help, but again, you have the opportunity to ask any questions that you may want to. I've had people sometimes say, well, gosh, if the candidate is picking the people that they want us to talk to, aren't they going to only pick people who are going to say nice things about them? Probably. Probably so. But the direction that I give them in writing, I'm going to be providing to you too, because frankly, partly what I want you to assess is how well did they follow the direction? Because part of the direction I give them is that you want this to be a broad representation of your stakeholders. Suppose, for example, it's the assistant superintendent of a district. You will likely want to see some of their board members. You'll want to have the chance to meet with their superintendent, some central office administrators, building principals, staff members, maybe union leaders, some parents, et cetera, right? And you'll see that in the written direction and guidance that I provide. So if there are key people missing, it's fair of you to say, well, is there a reason for that? Maybe there is. Maybe it's fair to read something into that. But the other part of this, and I do hear this from boards, actually almost to a surprising degree, they have said that these site visits, in some cases, have been the deciding factor for them, especially in a case where you've got two really strong finalists and you're really kind of weighing, we're not sure which way to go. It's to be able to sit face to face with people. It's one thing, you can, the old saying, what, damn people with faint praise, right? So it's one thing to say nice things about somebody, but you can say that very unenthusiastically, or it can be very heartfelt. I've had boards come back and say, my God, in this district, they were literally in tears talking about this person, how much they valued them, how much they would miss them if they were gone, versus another district where it was very dispassionate and it didn't seem like they would be all too upset necessarily, even though, again, the words coming out were positive. Body language, facial expression, there's a lot to be able to be gathered from having that opportunity. One district that stands out for me, where what they told me afterward was that there was a definite leaning one way with the two finalists before the site visit. The site visit flipped them, and in the end, they hired the other person based on what they saw and heard at that site visit. So do you have to do a site visit? No, you don't. You could say, nope, we choose not to. We don't think it's important. We highly recommend it. Other boards, I think, would highly recommend it based on the experience. Amazingly enough, we've had to hold virtual site visits recently. And even those, the board members have spoken very highly of and said that they've been really helpful. So again, we wanted to schedule anything specifically now, but at some point you'll need to decide which 3 members of the board can go to both of those site visits. And the only other obligation on their part is at the end of the second visit, they would have to commit to providing a joint written summary to the other 4 board members who couldn't be present. And when I say written summary, it shouldn't be a recommendation at all. It shouldn't be a value judgment. As much as possible, it should be an objective. Here's what we saw. Here's what we heard. I mean, it's okay. I think it is objective to say people in this district were really enthusiastic, or people in this district, maybe they said nice things, but weren't quite as enthusiastic. That's fair. But you would commit to having a statement that all 3 of you can agree that, yes, this captures what we saw and heard fairly. You would provide that to the other 4 board members, so they would have the opportunity to benefit from that experience as well. So any questions about the site visit?
How do boards normally go about picking those 3? Is it something the president just appoints, or what do you normally do?
From experience, I'll tell you that normally not everybody will necessarily be interested and or available due to the work schedule. So normally it starts with the board president asking who's willing and able. And if more than 3 volunteer, and nobody wants to kind of say, well, that's okay, I'll just kind of leave it, then the board president makes the final decision and chooses from among the 4 or 5 who say, I'd like to go.
Cool, cool.
Okay. So now, the week of May 10th is selection of the superintendent. Now I'm going to go back. I'll be a little bit redundant in saying this, but you're going to have by now a lot of data to consider. You're going to have the application, cover letter, resume, additional materials the candidates will have provided. You're going to have your own interview notes from the first and second round interviews. You're going to have feedback forms from your stakeholders who were present at first round interviews and second round interviews, and from those who were present at those stakeholder meetings with the finalists. And trust me, beyond that, people typically aren't shy about expressing what they think. So people that you're closer to, you'll probably be hearing more directly from them, and they'll be telling you exactly what they think, which is fine. You'll have the either the benefit of having been on the site visit or having the summary to reflect on and to consider. By then, too, I will have provided a summary for the final 2 candidates in terms of what I heard from references. I told you that I don't do reference checks before that first meeting. Excuse me, but as soon as you identify who it is you're interviewing, I start. Once you're down to finalists, I dig deeper. Excuse me, I don't limit that to the references that they give me, by the way. I have a background in HR, and trust me when I tell you that I learned a long time ago that you don't only call the people that the applicants are asking you to. So I go well beyond that. And what I do then for the 2 finalists is I provide just a summary of what I heard about those finalists. So you'll have that to consider as well. And by the way, at any time along the way, if there is anything that comes out on any of the candidates that is cause for concern, if it comes to my attention, I will be sharing that with you. You need to know. Conversely, if you become aware of something, suppose a constituent comes to you and says, oh my gosh, I heard this about this candidate and boy, you shouldn't pick this person. I'm going to ask you kindly to please let me know immediately. And I'm going to give you a quick example that's worth hearing. I did a search in another district where the teacher union president went to the board president and said that one of the candidates selected to interview was involved in testing fraud in a previous position. And so the board president came to me really upset. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Should we tell this person, never mind, what up? So, but it gave me the opportunity to look into it. And I was able to, with 100% certainty, determine that that was totally false. It never happened. And so I was able to reassure the board that there was no cause for concern. Frankly, though, had it gone the opposite way, and I was able to determine, well, yeah, there really was a problem, better that you find out before you possibly pick that person. So either way, it could be helpful. But so if I'm finding these things out, I'm letting you know. If you're finding or hearing something, share it with me. I'll vet it for you and I'll let you know what I find. So you're going to have a ton of information to really weigh and consider when it's time to make your final decision. What will simply happen is you'll come together. And again, kind of like will have done up to now, I will go to each of you one at a time, and I'll ask you to simply tell me, and stay again in the positive lane, tell me as to why you would want somebody, not why you wouldn't. But here's the person I would like to select as our next superintendent, and here's why. Each of you would have the chance to do so. Again, what normally happens is a clear consensus emerges, and then it would simply take a motion and a second. And presuming that's a successful motion, the board votes to approve it. You will have selected the person you would like to be your next superintendent. There's still a negotiation to take place, so you will not have hired the person yet. And that's why you see I've got a date there a couple of weeks later, which is an approximation, board action to hire a new superintendent. You would simply do that once you had come to a contractual agreement. You could do that at a regular meeting. You could do it at a special meeting. But you would simply have to take action like you do with any formal hire to formally hire this person as your next superintendent. You can see from the timeline with the July 1st start date, you'll be making this decision with plenty of time to spare and plenty of time for the new person to transition in whatever way he or she thinks that they may need to, and whatever way you may like to see them do that. So the one additional meeting we need to set for now then is that selection meeting for the week of May 10th. The only night that week that is impossible for me at this point is Monday, May 10th. I could meet any other night that week.
So right
You
now,
tell me.
Wednesday is tentatively a board meeting for us already. I'm assuming you would prefer to make it separate from that.
Well, I'll tell you this, Lisa, it doesn't have to be. I explained to you how this works, and I won't say that it never happens, that you go through that process and we're not where we need to be and it takes additional time to discuss. But normally it doesn't take an inordinate amount of time, because again, normally once every one of you has had the chance to publicly say, here's who I'd like to select and here's why, it's obvious that 4 or more of you have said, here's the person I want. A consensus is clear. You make a motion and you make your decision, and then you're free to, go off and take care of other business. So very honestly, if you prefer to do it that way, you could. If it gives you greater comfort, just in case, to separate that out, that's fine too.
I'll leave it to others to weigh in how they feel. I could honestly go either way. We could maybe add it onto the Wednesday board meeting and start with it. And if we don't have a consensus, we could have a backup, like on, the next night on Thursday, we could just, table it and move it, and continue the conversation. Or if you think that's a bad idea, we can just select a different evening.
I'll just say, I don't think you would want to table it. I think once we're into it, you want to stay into it and you want to come to resolution. But again, I'll tell you that I'm confident that even if you don't come to a quick resolution, I'm confident I can get you there without spending an inordinate amount of time. I can't guarantee it, but I feel very confident that that'll be the outcome.
Yeah, I'm free any day that week, and I'm perfectly fine with it being added to the board agenda on Wednesday.
I also like it being added to the board agenda, since Mr. Silveri feels fairly confident that, we can get it done then. I don't see the point in adding another night, and also my week doesn't look great except for that Wednesday. So other than the Monday, which he's not available.
Well, we also know as the school year starts to wrap up, some of you have seniors and those things can become busy as well. So it might just be easier to add it on to the Wednesday. And
And you normally start those meetings at 7 o'clock, you said?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'll be there for that too. Backtrack, the only time in this entire schedule you won't see me present is site visits. And again, through experience, we've learned that it's actually better for us to stay out of the board's way and just kind of let you go to these districts and have at it. So that's the one and only time, but otherwise I'll be there for every other step, including to walk you through that process of deliberation to make your final selection. So I will be there with you. So we're looking at that being Wednesday, May 12th. My advice to you is we make ourselves available. I would make myself available if you wanted my assistance with contract negotiation. We recommend that you get your legal counsel involved. And I think ideally, you may want to even have some discussion prior to and possibly even draft a contract and have something ready, even if the salary amount is left blank because it's going to be dependent on the person's experience, but to have all the rest of the details kind of worked out as best you can. Because what I've seen boards do at times then is as soon thereafter you're able to, you can provide the candidate with a draft contract. They will sometimes want to involve their legal counsel, which is totally appropriate, and however you choose to proceed with negotiations. But Again, we advise that you get your legal counsel involved, and I could assist if need be as well. And you do have plenty of time here. The good news for you too is even if for whatever reason that took a little bit longer than we anticipate here per this timeline, you got a lot of time. And normally those negotiations are not difficult. One of the things that we include, and we're going to get to that in the agenda, is you're going to include a salary range. And so if for whatever reason there's a candidate who thinks that you're not paying enough, they shouldn't be applying. And so if they've applied, it's a foregone conclusion that they've decided that that salary range is acceptable, and the negotiation is about where in that range do they fall and what other benefits might you include. So covered a lot of ground. You've asked some good questions along the way, but I want to kind of stop here and again, see if you have any questions at all about this. Pretty clear? Okay, and once again, I'm being redundant, I know, but I will update this timeline. I'll plug in those specific dates and times, and I'll be sending this to Sherry tomorrow to forward to you. All right. Are you okay to just plug along, or do you need to take a quick break and stretch your legs? Tell me. You okay to keep going?
I'm good with plugging along.
All right.
Um,
We'll finish that much sooner that way. So if you can, if anybody needs to get up and go, of course you can, but we'll just keep moving. So compensation and contract parameters. Compensation, you know, this is totally up to you, but you do need to, for the official position announcement, you're going to need to identify and then let me know what salary range do you want to provide. Something I can provide for you if you would find it helpful, and I've done it for other districts at times, is I can provide you with some comparables, meaning I can show you, give you a list of maybe some neighboring districts, and show you what their, not only what salary they're paying their superintendent, but even some of the other benefits they may be providing. You can compare and contrast that to yours, and then you can decide if, you know, where you want to go. You certainly want to be competitive, obviously, but you also want to be reasonable and have it kind of slotted in the right way. So if you would find that helpful, I can get that to you this week. And then whatever process you use to kind of go through that and make a decision, you know, so be it. So would that help?
I would very much like that information. None of us have ever done this before. So I think the more information you can provide us, the better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree also.
So I won't necessarily limit it to this, but do you have any districts in mind off the top of your head that you would be interested to, where you'd be interested to know what they're paying their superintendent by way of?
I would say Lance Cruz is pretty comparable to us. And maybe, I don't know, Roseville or Warren Con type.
Okay. Happy to do those. Any others come to mind?
I would probably say Romeo.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great one, Lisa. They're. I'm glad you said that. I didn't even think of that one.
Okay. Again, I won't limit it to these, but I would want to include those that you'd be interested in. Okay, and
Yes,
Go ahead.
The only thing I mean, looking up, you know, obviously there's a lot of these superintendent, the set pay, you know, you can find on the Mackinac Center or whatever, and that's there. What would be good to know is when it comes to benefits and when it comes to special provisions within those contracts, what's usual and customary, what's kind of the norm. You know, we ran into it with this last superintendent. There were some things that may or may not have been out of the norm, but if you could kind of give us a list of some outside benefits that may not always show up on when you're looking at a mass, you know, salary range of superintendents, if you know what I'm saying.
I do. And so let me put it this way to you. When you're at a point, I think, if this is okay with you, where you want to, again, perhaps enlist your legal counsel to start drafting a contract, that's where I'd be happy to weigh in. And if partly what you're looking for is, what are some other things you might want to include? What is the norm? For example, you look at vacation days, what's typical, what do you typically see, et cetera. For this purpose, this is to get a salary range identified for the purpose of having it for the posting. So I want to narrow the focus a little bit, even though I'll give you this information in two ways. I'm going to provide it in rank order for all the districts that I look at, and I'll even plug yours in so you can see where you stand there. But I'll give you a list in rank order by salary only. And then the same districts, I'll re-rank them and include any other benefits that they list through transparency reporting, which, sometimes will be an annuity. Sometimes it'll be mileage, sometimes it'll be vacation payout. It'll be, a number of other things that they may include that they're supposed to be including in their transparency reporting. So I would add those in, and then I would re-rank and show it both ways to you so that you would get that full picture. And then based on that, you can establish your own salary range.
So that's what I'm saying. So when you look at a salary range that we're going to put out there, that's encompassing everything that we're going to give that person: the car allowance, the annuity, is that what you're looking at? Or are you looking at total salary range that includes total cost of what that person's going to see?
Yeah, what you put in the posting is literally salary range,
Okay.
Just salary. It doesn't include total comp. So again, as you go into a negotiation, you're going to have a lot of wiggle room, frankly, and that'll partially help make your decision in terms of where within that salary range do you put this person. And that may be, again, partly it'll be dependent on the level of experience they have. Partly it'll be dependent then too. Well, if we're going to give you this much in salary, that'll impact perhaps how much additionally we may want to give you in regard to any other benefits, or whether we want to give those benefits at all. That's always a part of a negotiation a district goes into. But that's why I want to show it to you both ways. You'll have the full benefit of seeing too. For example, you could have a district that would show up on the list that I give you that is very high in its salary ranking. So you may think, oh, well, this district really pays very high as compared to the rest. But then when you look, you see they don't offer any other benefits at all. And when you put that in rank order as compared to other total compensation other districts provide, that can be pretty revealing too. So you'll have the benefit of being able to see all of that when you're making this initial decision.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at what you're going to put out there, because you want to put out a high enough salary range that you get quality candidates,
Yes.
But you don't want to put out too high of a range if that person's going to want certain obviously it's just the nature of the business, but it's an interesting way of looking at it.
No, you said it right. You want it to be high enough that you're not going to deter anybody who might otherwise be interested, within reason, of course. Yep. But that's where the range is important. And I've seen the range be anywhere from a $10,000 gap to a $20,000 gap. And very honestly, the larger the range, the more flexibility it gives you in terms of how those other benefits may come into play. So that, for example, if somebody says, I have to have a $10,000 annuity. I'm just throwing a wild number out there. Which then your thought is, well, but if we're going to give you that, then we're going to not go quite as high and set. That's all part of that negotiation.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And then contract parameters, the typical language, and I'm actually going to look at a posting. I think I have one handy. You can go as be as specific, and this is talking about length of contract, right? I would say the norm is 3 years for what it's worth. If you go less than that, it doesn't provide people with as much security as they're looking for. More than that, frankly, for your first contract with a new person, probably a little generous. 3 is pretty much a sweet spot, but quite often what districts will say, and I'm reading this from another posting, the Board of Education will offer a comprehensive multi-year contract. And beyond that, salary and benefits will be commensurate with the skills and experience of the successful candidate, with the salary range of, and then you plug the range in. So if you're comfortable with that, I think that gives you a lot of wiggle room, and I think you're probably pretty safe with that. Any objection? Any other thoughts? I will, by the way, so this will go into posting, which you're going to have final say in. So if when you see it, something about it doesn't strike you quite right, you're going to have a chance to provide feedback to Lisa, say, I think this may need to be changed, and she can provide guidance to me accordingly. So just know that too. I'm sorry, I skipped one. Basic qualifications. That was number 4. I jumped right over that. So basic qualifications, you want to be, in my opinion, and from experience, a little bit more broad and less specific, because you want to cast as wide a net as possible. Let me give you this example. I've had, just suppose you were to say, I want to put in the posting, they have to have had central administrative experience. If you think that, I get it. I get where you might want your candidates all to have that. But why limit yourselves to that? What if you happen to have somebody who hasn't gone beyond being a principal, but they've been a highly successful principal? And when you look at their application materials, and if you were to talk to them and talk to the people they work with and for, et cetera, you might find that may be the person who really is the best fit, the best person for the job. Conversely, when you're reviewing the applications, that's your opportunity to really be more picky, if you want to use that term, right? Because then you can say, all right, now that we see all the applicants, here's 6 who do all have central office experience. I really do prefer that. So I want to pick these 6. You can kind of narrow the scope at that time, but I think the time to do it is not in the application period. That's where you want to be more broad and not weed people out too soon, if that makes sense. So I'm going to give you some examples. Educational administrative experience. Pretty broad, right? What you can say through that is educational administrative experience, central administrative experience preferred. So candidates know we'd really rather have somebody with that, but if you don't have it, you can still go ahead and apply. We would still consider you. Master's degree in a related field required, advanced degree preferred. And the examples we typically give for advanced degree are ed specialist or doctorate. So again, it could be somebody who does not have more than a master's degree. You don't rule them out. But if when you're screening applicants, you decide that can be one of the filters you put candidates through, that's fine. Broad and diversified work experience, classroom experience preferred. Sometimes districts will say, well, having classroom experience is really important. I promise you that the feedback we get from your staff members will probably hear that from them. And it's understandable, right? And ideally, that I would tend to agree, ideally so. But you occasionally get that candidate who defies the norm. I use the example of Brian Whiston, who was formerly superintendent of Dearborn School District, was named at one point superintendent of the year, and was ultimately then, he went on from there to be a state superintendent for the state of Michigan before his untimely passing. He had never been in the classroom before he became a superintendent, and he was exceptionally successful. So there are exceptions to the rule. This type of language gives you more wiggle room, but at least puts out there that we really do value classroom experience, and we hope that you have that. And then we typically will say something like Michigan Administrative Certificate or equivalent. Somebody could be from out of state and have a certificate where there's reciprocity with Michigan. So I'm going to give you a chance to kind of push back a little bit if you think there are some specific qualifications that you think it's important to include, knowing again that you're going to have a second shot at this when I give you the first draft of the position announcement.
I'm just going to go out and say I think you're spot on. Keep it as open as possible. Get as many candidates in here, and then vet them through the interview or through the narrowing down process. There's a lot of high quality candidates out there, and you don't want to miss one because one box isn't checked.
Right.
But that's just my 2 cents.
I'll quickly, the example I gave you with the district where they picked somebody from tier C, and that became their next superintendent when they looked at all the candidates. The reason I had put that candidate in tier C was because they had so many applicants who had superintendent experience and central office experience that those are the people I placed in those top two groups. And I didn't put this person in tier C because she wasn't well qualified necessarily, but she just didn't have the same qualifications as the others. But again, she became their superintendent. She's still their superintendent. They're very happy with her. There are exceptions to the rules sometimes. So hearing no objection, I'll likely take that approach in this position announcement. You'll see it and have a chance to give some additional feedback at that time. Item 6 on the agenda is candidate recommendations. I don't want you to give them to me now, but I want to invite you to provide recommendations. So, and I'm not talking about inside the district. I'm talking about beyond, because presumably if there's somebody in the district, you know, you already have a relationship with those folks. If there's somebody outside the district who you know of that you think could be a viable candidate for the position, somebody who you would hope would consider applying, and you don't want to leave it to chance, you can shoot me an email or a text. Just give me the name, current position if you can, and even ideally contact information, obviously. I will reach out to that person and encourage them to consider applying. Typically what I'll tell them is, without saying exactly who, somebody in the district suggested I contact you, said they thought you might be somebody that they would like to see apply, and they would hope that you would at least consider doing so. I'm bringing this to your attention. Sometimes the answer I get is, I'm already looking at it. I'm already planning on it. Sometimes the answer is, oh, okay, I saw that, but I didn't give it much thought, but let me take a look. And again, in at least a couple of instances, that has resulted in that person becoming the next superintendent. So there's something about being contacted by the search consultant for whatever reason that can be a little bit compelling versus anybody else. I had that firsthand experience, and I will tell you, it did make a difference, where I saw a posting, thought it was interesting, but I thought, no, maybe not right now. And then the search consultant contacted me and said, we really would like to see you apply. And it made me look at that posting in a whole different way than I would have otherwise. So I encourage you, if there's anybody like that out there, get that word to me via text or email, or you can pick up the phone and call too, which is fine. And I will follow up and reach out to that person. Okay. Internal applicants. I'm just going to tell you what I would presume would be the case and what I would advise, and you can tell me if there's any disagreement. But if there are internal applicants, you want to just simply treat them in the same way that you do everybody else. You want to have an open process. You want to give everybody kind of a fair shot. When you see who all the applicants are, you want to consider an internal applicant side by side with all the other applicants. If you think that that internal applicant really is one of the best 4 to 6 people to interview, and you may well consider that person as your next superintendent, then by all means, you should invite them to interview. I'm going to tell you though, it's my belief that if you don't feel that way, and I'm not a big believer in courtesy interviews. I think it just strings people along. It takes an interview slot from maybe somebody else who could be a viable candidate. So if for whatever reason, you don't believe that you don't see that person as a strong option, I would advise that when we go through the process of selecting the people that you want to interview, don't do it as a courtesy. Pick the people that you think are possibly best fit, best candidates, and let it roll. That can sound a little bit harsh. I don't mean it to. I would frankly say, as a courtesy, and you may not know this, it takes 7 of you. It's about what the 7 of you think, not what any one of you thinks. But if there was an internal candidate and you were virtually certain that there's no way a majority of the board was ever going to support this person's candidacy, and yet you knew that the person was likely to apply, frankly, I would advise somebody to be kind enough to tell the person that they may want to be aware that there may not be support, right? Because it may spare them the kind of what could be the embarrassment of applying and not getting selected to interview. that could be a tough conversation to have. And again, it may be tough to assess whether that's the will of the whole board or not. So if you're not sure, don't go there. But if there were certainty about that, you might want to be kind about it in that way.
I guess I have a question. When you provide, when we start choosing candidates for first round interviews, so do you redact a bunch of information? Would we even know that an internal candidate, when they're not identified and we don't refer to them, maybe by candidate A, B, C?
That's a great question. When you see the applicants in closed session, you're seeing everything. There's nothing redacted. You're seeing everything and then some. I'm also sharing additional information that I may know. It's when you go public and you start identifying the candidates that you would like to invite to interview. It's at that time you're saying candidates A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. So if your internal candidate was candidate Z, you would be identifying that person that way. Members of the public who might be listening in wouldn't know the difference. And then in the event that there wasn't a majority of the board supporting that, that never needs to be made public. That makes sense?
Right.
You will know. You'll have all that. Okay. I appreciate your patience. Like I said, I do a lot of talking in this meeting. It's not my preference, but it's a necessary evil at this point in the process. All right, discussing key expectations, roles, and responsibilities. Your role in this is to stay as highly engaged as you can, to be involved at every step of the way. What I really encourage you to do is avoid, which can happen sometimes. Here's all these steps in the process, and which will provide a lot of data, as I had reviewed. I won't go through it again. It's so important that you are being as objective as you can and as analytical as you can, that you continue to reflect on the candidate profile, but that you avoid what can happen sometimes, where you interview somebody and you fall in love, so to speak, right? Where you just, based on an interview, you disregard anything and everything else you see, and oh my God, I love this person. I want this person to be my next superintendent. The interview is important, obviously, don't get me wrong, and how you react to that candidate is important. But I think what's really important is that you're committed to being very diligent and very thoughtful and very deliberate in your decision making, and that you're looking at the information that you have in totality, including what you see and hear in the interviews, and that you make a really objective decision in that way. The other thing I'd ask of you is that you trust the process. We've been doing this for a long time. We have over time tweaked things and modified things. We're about continuous improvement, like I'm sure you are. And so we think we have a process that works exceptionally well. And if you trust the process and let it work as it's intended, my expectation, again, is that you're going to get to the end of it and be very happy with the process. You'll come away feeling like it was inclusive, it was transparent, it was thorough, that you were able to do everything that you needed to do in order to make and had everything you needed to have in order to make a great decision. And obviously, most importantly, you're going to feel good about your final decision. So I would simply ask you to trust the process. Let me do the things I need to do for you. You fulfill your responsibilities. And I think if we all pull our own weight and do what it is that we need to do, it's going to work as intended. And I think we'll all be feeling pretty good about it at the end. As far as your expectations for me, again, I'm going to be there with you every step of the way, with the one exception being the site visits. I'll be available and accessible to you throughout. I asked you to go through the board president, but still, I don't want there to be unanswered questions. I don't want there to be confusion. I don't want there to be angst. I want you to know what you need to know and be crystal clear every step along the way. So I will work very hard for you. I take this very seriously, and I'm not going to be feeling as though I was successful unless you reach the end of this and you're happy with the process and happy with the result. So I'll be working hard to make sure that happens. The other part of this too is that you may not agree with one another on everything along the way. That's not uncommon with boards, of course. I'm sure you've experienced it. That can cause angst, that can cause conflict. This is, to a large extent, it's a subjective opinion you're going to be making. You're trying to make it based on a lot of data that you're going to have. It's still a subjective decision. It still fundamentally comes down to your opinion, considering everything about who you think is going to be the best choice to interview, who you think is going to be the best choice to be a finalist, who you think the best choice is to be your next superintendent. So you want to avoid falling into the trap that if some of your colleagues don't agree, you end up in the minority on any of these decisions, that you get overly frustrated, that it becomes adversarial in any way or combative. That's how boards of education work, right? It's ultimately, it's up to the majority of the board. Ideally, we'll get to the end of this and you're going to have 7 people in full agreement that you found the right person and you all agree on who it is. And, quite often it does work out that way. But even if not, what's going to be important at the end, especially, is that you all get behind that final decision. I described the process to you where each of you on that final night will have a chance to say, here's who I'd like to offer the position to, and here's why. So suppose there are 5 people in favor of one candidate and 2 for the other. My advice is that obviously there'll be a motion made for the person that 5 of you support. But my advice is that you will have had a chance publicly to say, I really would have preferred the other person, but that when it comes time to vote, that everybody votes for the candidate of choice, because I think what's important then is that you all come together and it's a clear message that I may not have agreed with this initially, but if it's clear this is who our next superintendent is going to be, I'm going to get behind this decision and we're going to have a public show of support for our new superintendent right out of the gate. So to as great an extent as possible, stick together, air your differences respectfully. And there may be differences, but ultimately you all get behind whatever decisions that are made. And, that's going to be especially important when you get to the end of this process and you will have selected a new superintendent. That person will need that from you in order to be highly successful in that role. How about you for me? Are there expectations you may have for me that you want to share now? What do you need from me that maybe I haven't expressed already? Anything?
I for one, I can't even begin to ask because I don't know what I don't know. So I suppose I would rely on you to let us know what we need to know. Even no matter how small it is. I mean, 2 of us are brand new. A few of us are only here for 2 years. No one's ever done this. So I would just look to you for anything small you can, big, small, whatever. Let us know so that we can make the best decisions for our district.
I appreciate that. So I'll be mindful along the way, kind of every step of the way, that if I need to provide just a little bit of extra guidance and direction, just to be sure you're all on the same page and know what to expect, I appreciate that. And I'll keep that in mind for sure.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. Mr. Middlestat, who couldn't be with us tonight, is probably the only person who's gone through this process. The rest of us have not. So I agree with that sentiment, but also, our last superintendent, was here for quite a long time, so even regardless, it's been quite a while since anybody has gone through the process in this district. And, so in terms of, particularly contract and things like that, your guidance, I think, would be appreciated on a lot of aspects, just because, a lot has changed in 21 years, certainly. So
I think probably so. Yeah. My goal is to be as helpful as I can be. And so if there's anything you're not kind of naturally getting from me, you just need to ask, and I'll do the absolute best I can to be as helpful to you as I possibly can. Look, again, I want you to get this right. I want you to feel great about this when you're done with it. And so anything I can do along the way to help make that happen, I'm all for it. Okay. All right. As a really kind of last step in this process, tonight. I want to go ahead, as I indicated before, and the same questions I'll be asking of your stakeholders, I want to ask of you and get your input now. And I'll tell you in advance, which I think is fair, everything that you share won't necessarily show up in the final analysis, because again, I am looking for most frequent responses and kind of pulling common threads. But I do give a little bit more emphasis to what board members share, and I think I should, because you're the ones who are going to be the ultimate decision makers. So I think it's important for me to go through this process and hear specifically from you what it is that you'd like to share, and then compare and contrast that to everything I'll be getting through the electronic survey. So let me get off of this page and to this. So I can't see you any longer, but can you still see me, and can you see what's on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, so very simply, again, this is, and it's we're not looking to eat for a consensus of the board on any of these points. So for each of you, I'm just going to invite you to share your thoughts. It's your opinion. And I'm going to record it here as you share it. Take your time, because I'm not the fastest typist in the world. And also, I may well be paraphrasing what you say. And if you see what I've written and it doesn't really quite capture what you wanted to say, please correct me. You won't hurt my feelings. This needs to be what you want to say, not what I think you want to say, if that makes sense. So what are those key skills, qualities, and characteristics that you feel like the next anchor-based superintendent needs to possess in order to be highly successful? Fire away.
You know, I think they need to be a great communicator, but to go even deeper, I think they need to work well with who's here. Anchor Bay is kind of a very tight-knit community, and it's almost a large school in a small town atmosphere, and it can be real easy to get off on the wrong track with folks around here. You know, if just by not communicating enough and not in the way you communicate. And somebody that definitely has the utmost respect for the teachers and staff here that need to be taken care of. That's probably number one for me.
I would say strong leadership skills, community focused.
Do you want us to, I mean, I would agree with those that are already, do you want us to say if we agree with those things, or just to add to the list? Are you trying to emphasize things, or?
No, at this point, you know, again, I'm really going to be emphasizing fundamentally the kind of things that you share now, especially as many of these are going to correlate to what I'm hearing, I'm guessing, from your constituents. So no, I'm not necessarily looking for agreement as much as just to see what you'd like to add.
Okay. I would agree with the strong leadership. I would like somebody who's an expert relationship builder. And to add to this list, to some of these points I agree with as well, but I really would like to have somebody who's energetic and enthusiastic about, you know, the role and the district and the community.
I was going to echo that, Lisa, to match or exceed the energy of our community, because everyone's very passionate here. And we need someone who's going to rally and inspire and foster positive relationships. And where there are negative ones, that they can work to turn those around without being polarizing, I suppose.
I don't know if I can add to the strong leadership skills, part of that for me, and I don't know if anybody else agrees, but I want somebody who leads from the front, that wants to be the face of the district, that wants to be out there and talk to the parents and do the meetings and, you know, and not, because there's many different ways to lead. I want to see this person.
I agree, Mike. I want them to be enmeshed in our community, in our district. I want to see them at, you know, the
Attending events.
garden roundup. I want to see them at the football game. I want to see them, you know, watching swim and dive. You know, not all the time. They can't be everywhere at once, but I want someone who's just going to be all in for our district and our community, because it spreads much further than our schools.
I think with that, I agree with everything you guys are saying, and with to have that dynamic leader that's out there in the district, but also forms bonds with the students. And where, you know, I've watched some graduations where it's like, you know, I don't want to say 90%, but 75% of the students knew that superintendent and were like, you know, like you said, he's at events, he's out there, he or she is out there, and they know him. And that goes with what you guys are saying of being enmeshed in the district, but also just building those bonds and those relationships with the students to keep them focused and centered where they need to be. And then that's just an added person out there that can help them through if they're having a tough time or whatever. So
I agree, Jen. Yeah. To really have that one-on-one with who they're representing. Yeah, absolutely.
Back to the leadership from the front. I want a leader that you know, it might be a strength, but, you know, mentoring. Let's go here. Come with me. We're going to go here. Not a leader that points in a direction and says, "Go do." I don't know where that fits into that, but I like subservient leadership. Is probably the best way to describe it.
All right, long pause, which may mean you're still thinking, or may mean that we've captured the things that are most critical.
well, I guess the other, I mean, the not that it means everything, but, and I don't see it in, I mean, obviously all these things are good, but they also have to have a good fiscal mind, I guess, or however you want to say it, financially conscious about, you know, especially where we're at now, what they're coming into. And I mean, it should be all right, but just, you know, they know their way around that, I guess. Can stay within.
Mhm.
Right.
Maybe some background in that. But I do believe, like you said earlier too, and I know it's not something like Mike said, we don't want to shoehorn ourselves in, but I think that someone from the educational that's been in a classroom or been around, I think our teachers are definitely dying for something like that they can, someone that they feel will be there and there with the trenches with them. So I think that might help us a lot with where we're currently at with that relationship.
Someone that's going to listen to hear and not listen to speak. So someone who's going to come in and hear what we have to say and not say, "Oh, look at all these great ideas I have for you," if they haven't been here before or they're not internal, but will come in and listen to the teachers, listen to the board, listen to the parents, and find out really what is needed, what's, you know, and not come in with these grand ideas of, "This is what I'm going to do for you guys." We need someone to have vision, but to get on board first, you know, and find out what we're all about if they're not, you know, internal, but not someone who's, I don't know if I'm quite saying what I want to say, but
I would like to add to Jill's, and maybe this will help Jill. I want somebody with foresight, to know where the district needs to go with, evolutionary change and education, and the needs of our community as that evolves, but also, as others touched on, inspiring that change from within and not driving it from behind, to kind of keep our district up to date.
I'd like to also add maybe a background in education. We want to be a leader, not a follower.
These are great. Anything else come to mind for now? If not, I'm hearing a big pause. I'm going to move on to the next item. Just know, though, that if something, as we're doing that, pops into your head, falls under this first heading, and you would like to go back and add it, I'm more than happy to do so. And again, you're also going to get a shot at the final candidate profile. And if there's something significant that you feel like may be missing from that, you're going to have an opportunity to say so then too. So major strengths, what I'll be asking in the survey is for people to think of it in terms of top 5, bearing in mind, again, this is going to be a relatively concise part of the position announcement. It's going to be for promotional purposes more than anything else, really to attract people to apply to the position. So I'm guessing that I'm talking to 7 people, 6 people who are immensely proud of the district and who could probably give me 100 things. I'm going to ask you to really force yourself to think, what are those things above all else about your district that really stand out?
I think certainly we can all attest to, we have some great test scores, across the board, but particularly our elementaries are very strong. And so I think, maintaining that and having that educational background and curricular focus that's kind of what drives, I think, some of us to say those things from above. So.
I don't know if this is where this goes, but I would say our community focus and our teachers, when people come here, they stay. My kids are second generation. I know Mr. DeRue's kids are second generation. Teachers stay here for 25 years. That's why our scores are so high, is because we have so much experience. And sports. I mean, our sports programs are taking off.
To build on what Mike's saying is we also have a lot of parental involvement at all, in everything from the classroom to our extracurriculars, to you name it, they're there. And it's a huge benefit of being in this district.
I agree. I think, even though our high school building itself can be large, we are a fairly close-knit community. Oftentimes, the community can come together for situations or people or events. And I think that's important to a lot of people in our community, myself included, to see that engagement.
I know we talked about the high visibility and meshed in the district up above, but I need someone that can come in without being a politician and strengthen our relationships with our local government. And we're not in just one community, we're in what?
Oh, we lost you, Pat.
Patrick, you cut off at the end.
Well, major strengths, athletics was mentioned. Our band is, I don't even know all the awards they've won or won. So yeah, our band is award winning. Yes.
You can put choir in there too if you want. I know it's all music.
Yeah.
Our choir is amazing. And the other thing that I was thinking was we're kind of, New Baltimore is kind of small townish, Chesterfield's a little bigger, Ira's very small townish, but we offer so many different things as far as electives go that most schools don't.
Right. We have 16 CTE programs, and I've looked into some of the neighboring districts. They do not have as many as we do.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Yeah, I think at the CTE meeting, they say that Ms. Kenwer mentioned that we have the most CTE programs in the county.
I believe you're right, Dennis.
And they're growing too. I mean,
Mhm.
we've got more on the horizon.
Yeah.
That's pretty strong. I'll be asking Sherry too, by the way, to if she has any, if there's any, either whether they're promotional materials or just, things you may have up on anywhere that you use to kind of highlight some of the strengths of the district, to share that with me as well. So I'll look to pull from that also.
Might not be a bad idea to look in the ways that we give back to the community too. With we have different clubs and different programs where we either foster a program or the teachers have a group that takes care of homeless children and things like that. There's all sorts of things going on in this school that give back to the community.
Yeah, we do have a lot of student-led clubs. We have HOSA, SAD, National Honor Society, and things like that too. I mean, the list could go on.
I think what I would also just like to add is that we have a very dedicated, energetic staff, from the teaching staff to transportation. I mean, honestly, across the board, I don't want to name them because I will leave somebody out inadvertently, but we have very dedicated employees and staff that make our district run day to day very well.
Yeah, I don't think we can say enough. We're all here for a reason.
It's great. Anything else before we wrap this up? Okay. And I am now having technical difficulty. How did I close that? Can you still see and hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, then rather than bounce out of the meeting, I cannot see you any longer, but if you can see me and hear me, and I can hear you loud and clear, it's fine. Because really, we've reached the end of the agenda for tonight's meeting. I feel like I'm coming away with everything that I needed to accomplish. Hopefully you did as well. Before we totally wrap things up, are there any other questions you may have, or anything else I can do for you here in the near future?
Are you going to be staying on to listen to our open forum?
I can, if you think there could be some value in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You never know.
Mhm.
I'll tell you what then, what I'll do, if you don't mind, because I there's something strange about my, when I go to full screen, I don't have the I can't stop sharing the screen. I lose that feature. And so I'm kind of stuck. So I think what I'll do then is log out and immediately log right back in again. So then I'll have the, wait a second,
Oh, you might be okay now.
I'm back.
I stopped your screen sharing, so
There we go. I wasn't able to do
see
it,
now.
but I can see you. Yes. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, I'm back. I'll stick. So just again, real quickly, I'll get that when this is over and I log out, I'll forward that link to Sherry. Is her email address on your district website?
You know, I'm honestly not sure, but I will send it to you right now.
Perfect. Okay, then I'll have this. I'll send that to Sherry. And then what you can expect too is by a week from Friday, I'll have that draft position announcement ready to get out to you. Give you a chance to get some quick feedback, and we'll look to have that posted by the following Monday. So we are off and running. I really appreciate your involvement and attentiveness this evening. Thank you so much. And I'll stop and I'll stick around though to hear the rest of the meeting.
Okay. Any final questions from anybody?
I just like to thank you. I think it was a great presentation. I'm glad that we chose you and your team. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks. I am too. I appreciate that. Thanks, Dennis.
I would agree with Dennis, and the more communication, even if it comes through Lisa, the better, for this board, at least. I'm sure most of the members would agree that, more is better. So we appreciate whatever you funnel to us. When you're talking about gathering, salary and information and other things along that, again, the board is hungry for information. This is obviously the first time we've gone through this, as Ms. Knox mentioned. So whatever help you can give there to guide us as newbies, if you will, we certainly would appreciate.
I will keep that in mind. I will strive to do that without being asked, but I want to reiterate too, if there's anything that you need that you're not automatically getting from me, just please ask and I will provide it. I'll work to stay on top of that.
Okay. All right. So we'll move into open forum. So
I'm going to search for Crystal Ortega.
Yes, I do know there was Crystal Ortega wanted to speak.
So unmute her.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Are we good?
Yes.
All right, Lisa. Well, I think you guys did a nice job in kind of reiterating what you're looking for in our next superintendent. And if I guess I had to summarize in one word, what we're not looking for based on everything you guys listed is we don't want a dictator. Someone who's just gonna, like you all said, do as I say, not as I do, so to speak, and give orders. So it was nice to kind of hear all of you guys kind of collaborate to that effect. We want someone who's going to lead by an example, someone who's going to listen and hear what all of you have to contribute, and then maybe even offer some suggestions along the way. And then listen to the community, get down and dirty. Sorry, that might have sounded wrong, but and listen to the kids and listen to the community. I'll go back to, I have a senior, when my kid was in elementary school, having some of the school board out cooking hot dogs on field day, doing something as simple as that, attending a football game, and it's those small gestures that inbred our superintendent, our secondary education director, and I'm not picking on Joe McDonald because it wasn't him at the time, just getting involved with the kids, getting involved with you guys so that we can move the district forward in a more positive way. And I'm not saying that there's tons of negatives, because we know we're human and we're imperfect people at times. So as you guys got through the process, I think you came up with a good list tonight as to what you're looking for the future. I guess my only question, and this may or may not, I may have read the press release wrong today, is obviously we know there's a small situation with funding in Lansing right now towards schools. I believe as it relates going into next school year, would this affect how we proceed come July 1st once the decision is made? I'm not sure we can answer that today or not. Like our overall operating budget. If we can't answer that today, that's fine. When we get to that point, we deal with it, right? Lisa, if that makes sense to you. I know they're kind of playing hang on to the money because we don't want to release it because we don't want, you know, the governor playing back and forth with our schools kind of thing. I believe she held a press conference today to that effect, and hopefully they'll work it out beforehand, but you know, we've got time for that, if that makes sense to you. And that's it. So like I said, you guys came up with a great list. So I think that's something to look forward to for our district. So thank you guys for that.
Thank you. I have a hand from Stephanie Richards. Let's see.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Perfect. I just wanted to thank Mr. Silvery. I think you did a great job outlining, kind of going through this. As everybody has already stated, this is our district's, or I should say our board members, except for Mr. Middlestat, who's not here first time. So I think that hiring you and having you guide us through that is phenomenal. As far as meeting times, I know that, you know, a lot of you said the earlier times work, maybe or maybe not for Mr. Middlestat, but think about the community who wants to attend these meetings too. 5:30 is when a lot of people get off of work. So just keep that in mind as we're coming up with these future meetings, especially if you're talking in person and drive times. But other than that, I love the list you guys came up with. I love the positive focus, hearing great things about the district. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Seeing no others, I'm just going to make a comment real briefly that so we will be forwarding shortly, you know, when Mr. Silveri gets it to us, we will be putting out and advertising that link to get community and stakeholder feedback, whether it be staff or community or students even. So we will advertise that well. And so look forward to that in the coming days. And we will continue on with this process as we outlined tonight. I didn't have on the agenda for any board comments, but if, you know, I'll open it up if any board members had anything they wanted to add briefly, or we can move on. Okay, seeing none. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Moses, second by Ms. Knox. And Ms. Green, will you call the roll?
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
Ms. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Burkmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
and Mr. Green votes yes. Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Silveri, and thank you everybody for joining in tonight, and everybody have a good night.